In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 college basketball games happening on December 13, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 3 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Indiana versus Kentucky. Indiana heads into this matchup as the so-called underdog, but it does not really walk in like a team that is supposed to roll over and say thank you for the check. You have a true rivalry setting, a loud SEC building, and a number hanging that leans more on brand names than on how these two squads have actually been playing lately. Kentucky is priced like the big home favorite that just needs to show up, yet their body of work has been split between blowout wins against softer opponents and frustrating nights against stronger competition where things have come apart when the lights felt a little hotter. Indiana, on the other hand, has quietly been building a profile that looks much more like a live underdog than a sacrificial visitor. Here is the thing, Indiana's style fits the kind of game that keeps them inside a number on the road. They rely on spacing, movement, and confident shooting, not just throwing the ball into the post and hoping for whistles. When a team is built that way, it travels a bit better because rhythm and decision-making are not as dependent on getting a friendly whistle or a soft rim at home. Their offense has been humming along, putting up big numbers and playing with a sense of freedom that you can see even without staring at a spreadsheet, and that kind of freedom often makes a team more dangerous when the crowd is roaring against them, not less. Kentucky still has the talent edge on paper, and that part is real. They have length, they have athletes, and they have enough guards to keep a constant stream of fresh legs on the floor. The catch is that talent has not always turned into clean, grown-up basketball for them. Against high-level opponents, they have looked rushed at times, forced shots early in possessions, and gone through stretches where the half-court offense gets sticky. When they face a group like Indiana that can shoot, space, and make you guard for a full possession, that volatility becomes a real concern for anyone laying the points. Another wrinkle is the pressure. Kentucky is at home with expectations, with a fan base that does not exactly do patient when things get tight. Indiana is playing with more house money energy here, coming in as the team that gets to throw the first punch rather than the one that has to answer every bit of tension in the building. That kind of psychological split matters against the spread. The favorite can start to feel every missed box out and every loose ball as a referendum on the whole season, while the underdog can just keep stacking possessions and quietly drag the game into that zone where every bucket they score makes the number look bigger and bigger. You add in the fact that Kentucky has shown some uncomfortable splits between how they handle lesser competition and how they handle stronger, better coached teams, and it paints a pretty clear picture. Indiana's current identity is stable, confident, and modern, with an offense built to punish any lapse in closeouts and any hesitation on switches. That is exactly the type of profile that tends to hang around as an underdog, even in a tough building, and it is exactly the sort of setup where taking the points makes more sense than trusting the favorite to suddenly solve its inconsistency in one night. As our first pick for this matchup, the Indiana Hoosiers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. You have two teams that both like to play with tempo, both are comfortable getting into their offense early in the clock, and neither one is built around grinding possessions down to the last second. That alone nudges things toward a higher scoring game. When both coaches are willing to let their guards push, probe, and pull the trigger without overcoaching every touch, the game tends to breathe a little more, and that usually shows up in the total points. Kentucky's offensive style naturally lends itself to a busy scoreboard. They like to attack the paint, get downhill, and rely on their size and athleticism to finish. When they are in rhythm, you see long stretches where the ball barely touches the floor from rebound to layup. That type of approach does 2 things that matter for the number. First, it creates a lot of high-value looks near the rim. Second, it speeds the whole thing up because quick shots mean more possessions, and more possessions mean more chances for points on both sides, not just for the home team. Indiana brings a different flavor that still points in the same direction. Their offense, with its focus on spacing and outside shooting, creates natural surges in scoring. When a team shoots well from deep and is encouraged to keep firing, you end up with pace inside the possession itself. Even when the raw tempo is not absurd. The quality of looks can spike the combined total. A couple of hot stretches from 3 can turn a normal game script into one of those contests where you look up and realize the score has jumped by 15 points in what felt like 2 minutes. Let me explain why that pairing is especially interesting. One side wants to attack the rim, the other is comfortable bombing away from outside. Defenses have to pick their poison. If Kentucky commits extra help inside, rotations to the perimeter get longer and Indiana's shooters can find windows. If Indiana leans harder on protecting the arc, Kentucky's drivers and bigs get more space on rolls and cuts. Either way, the trade-off favors scoring. You are effectively choosing which type of shot you are giving up more often, not whether you are giving one up at all. Then you factor in the rivalry element and the emotional charge that comes with it. Games like this rarely settle into quiet, methodical chess matches. There is pride on both benches, there are fans who have been circling the date for months, and there is a natural tendency for everyone on the floor to lean into aggression rather than caution. That usually means quicker triggers, more transition chances, and a whistle that can tighten late if things get physical, which brings free throws into the picture. Fouling late in close rivalry games does not just decide who wins, it often serves as a turbo button for the final combined score. So even if there are brief stretches where the nerves show and both teams miss a few shots, the overall recipe still tilts toward a game with plenty of made buckets, plenty of possessions, and enough late-game chaos to push the combined number into a higher range. You have one team that likes to run and finish inside, another that is comfortable scoring in bunches from outside, and a setting that encourages both to lean into what they do best, rather than playing scared. That is usually how you end up with a matchup that reads like a track meet on the stat sheet rather than a slow burn. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Arizona versus Alabama. Arizona walks into Birmingham wearing that shiny number 1 next to its name, sitting at 8-0, and the whole thing has the feel of a measuring stick night for everyone in the building, including the folks holding tickets. Alabama is sitting at 12 in the rankings with a 7-2-0 mark, very much alive in the national conversation but still cast as the team that has to prove it can handle the current bully of the sport on a big neutral floor. The twist, of course, is that this neutral is Legacy Arena in Birmingham, so it is technically not a true home game, but it is still Alabama country, with plenty of crimson in the lower bowl and a crowd that will roar every time the Tide even think about a transition 3. Honestly, that setting matters as much as any number on a betting sheet, because you are not just handicapping rosters, you are also handicapping how comfortable each side will feel when things get wild in the second half. Arizona has already shown it can handle that kind of stage, which is where this starts to get interesting. The Wildcats have gone into big early season showcases and walked out with real wins, not moral victories, taking down Florida and Las Vegas and UConn in stores, both in high-pressure, national TV spots where every possession felt like it carried a little extra weight. That travel and win pattern tells you a lot about their personality. They are comfortable playing away from Tucson, they do not get rattled if a crowd swings against them, and they can win when the game slows down late. If you like the idea of a calm, methodical favorite that has already passed a couple of stress tests, Arizona checks that box. Here is the thing, though, Alabama does not really let you stay calm. This team is running at one of the fastest tempos in the country, sitting near the top of the national charts in possessions and points per game, and they are dropping about 95 points a night while giving up just under 80. That scoring profile is not just empty inflation against bad teams either, because it is built on a clear shot diet, a ton of threes, a ton of rim attacks, and enough free throws to keep the scoreboard moving even when the jumpers go cold for a few minutes. The risk, of course, is that Alabama lives with some volatility. If the threes are off, they can look a bit reckless, but if you have watched them for a couple of seasons, you know that playing fast and aggressive is not a phase, it is the operating system. Mix that with a building full of fans who drove in from every corner of the state, and a number that asks the supposed underdog to simply hang around in what could feel like a home game in everything but name, and the argument starts drifting toward the side that loves chaos a little more than the market seems to be pricing in. As our first pick for this matchup, the Alabama Crimson Tide to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. This total is sitting in a range that would look absurd for most college games, but somehow feels almost normal for this matchup. Books are hanging a projection in the mid-170s, and if you just look at the raw scoring numbers, it makes sense. Arizona is averaging about 88.5 points per game. Alabama is at roughly 95.1, and the combined profile lands in the low 180s before you even adjust for opponent quality or game script. On paper, that sounds like one of those totals that gives you a small panic attack the moment you click it, but if any pairing scoring can push a number that high, it is one where both offenses are already living in that neighborhood across the first month of the season. Arizona is not just putting up points, it is doing it with a style that travels. The Wildcats are scoring efficiently inside the arc, finishing well at the rim, and living at the free throw line often enough to build comfortable margins, which is why their average scoring differential is sitting north of 20 points per night. That kind of margin usually means a lot of garbage time slowdowns, yet they are still in the high 80s, which quietly hints that when they are pushed for a full 40 minutes, there is probably another gear in terms of total possessions and shot volume. On the other side, Alabama is not exactly known for locking people up. They allow opponents to score in the high 70s on average, and that defense tends to trade a bit of efficiency for tempo, which is another way of saying they are fine with you scoring, as long as they score more. If you picture how this game actually looks for 2 hours, it is hard to see both coaches suddenly deciding to slow things to a crawl in a primetime showcase. Alabama will want to push off every miss and many makes, chase early threes, and test Arizona's transition defense over and over. Arizona, for its part, has already shown it can keep scoring against ranked teams in different styles of games, from track meets to grindy second halves, and it has enough half-court punch to punish any lazy closeouts or late rotations that come with a frantic tempo. Sure, there is always a universe where nerves, whistles, or poor shooting drag a total like this down, and people who like unders will tell you that big neutral site games sometimes start tight and cagey, but here the numbers, the pace, and the personality of both teams keep pulling you back toward a script where the scoreboard works overtime rather than takes the night off. When you stack up the scoring averages, the tempo, the willingness of both offenses to shoot early and often, and the fact that neither side is built around grinding the clock, the statistical and stylistic pieces line up in one clear direction for the total, especially for anyone who is comfortable sweating every possession like it is a fast break in an NBA game. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. UCLA versus Gonzaga. This matchup in Seattle feels less like a neutral floor non-conference game and more like a West Coast family argument that everyone circled on the calendar months ago. You have Gonzaga walking in at 9-1, ranked inside the top 10 with a scoring margin that looks like a video game, and you have UCLA at 7-2, tougher than they look on paper, freshly battle-tested after a schedule that has already thrown Arizona, Cal, Washington, and Oregon at them in the first month. The spread sitting near double digits in Gonzaga's favor is basically the market telling you, yeah, this might not be a coin flip, but the fun part is figuring out whether that number is actually too rich or still not quite high enough. On one side, you have Gonzaga, who play like they are late for a flight. They push, they run, they crash the glass, and they do not really care if you are ready for the next possession yet. They are hanging around 93 points per game with one of the best scoring margins in the country, winning by almost 4 touchdowns on average. And that is not just because they beat up 1 or 2 overmatched teams. That profile includes a 72-point demolition of Southern Utah, a 95-85 win over Alabama, a 100-61 blowout of Maryland, and a 35-point correction against Kentucky right after getting smacked by Michigan. UCLA, by contrast, is trying to slow everything down like someone riding the brakes on a mountain road. Their adjusted tempo sits near the bottom of the national rankings, and that is by design. Their staff wants half-court possessions, set pieces, and a game where every cut and screen feels like it has been rehearsed in a dark film room 100 times over. They are giving up about 65 points per night, top tier nationally, and they have already survived their share of stressful nights, from the neutral floor battle with Arizona to the neutral floor loss to Cal at Chase Center and a grindy win over Oregon where they had to steady themselves late. The spread conversation really starts with bodies. Gonzaga's frontcourt of Graham Ike and Braden Huff has been bullying people. Ike is averaging in the mid-teens in points and over 8 rebounds per game. Huff is right there with him as a double-figure scorer, and together they helped put 95 on Alabama and 100 on Maryland while swallowing the glass. UCLA can absolutely fight back up front. They have real length with Tyler Belotto and Xavier Booker, and they have already shown they can stand toe-to-toe with big frontcourts like Arizona. The problem is that Gonzaga can keep throwing size and strength at you for 40 minutes, and very few teams can match that wave. Then you add the ankle subplot. Graham Ike sat out the North Florida game with left ankle soreness, and that could scare some people away on a big number, but the reporting from Gonzaga has consistently framed it as precautionary, with the coaching staff expecting him to be fine moving forward. While he was out, Gonzaga still won by 51, still dominated the glass, and still made it look like they had the best front line on the floor by a mile. That is the luxury here, even if Ike is at 90%. His backup scenario is essentially let Braden Huff play like a featured star for a night, which is not exactly a downgrade. The real spread edge, though, lives in the depth chart. Gonzaga's bench is averaging nearly 37 points per game, which sits inside the top 20 nationally, and Mark Few has already used 5 different starting lineups in their first 10 games. This is not one of those years where the Zags rely on 6 guys and hope nobody gets in foul trouble. They routinely go 9 deep with real roles, and it shows up in the way they keep stretching leads in the second half when the other side looks exhausted. UCLA, on the other hand, is very good at the top of the rotation, but when you isolate their 4 games against high major opponents, the bench has combined for roughly 30 total points, about 7.5 per game, which is a staggeringly small slice of the offense. If this turns into a foul-heavy, physical game, the team that can bring more real contributors off the pine has a huge edge, and that team is clearly wearing blue and red. There is also the little matter of geography. This is a neutral game, but it is in Seattle, which is close enough to Spokane that half the building is likely to feel like the kennel with nicer lighting. UCLA will travel and bring their fans, sure, but this environment is built for Gonzaga to feel comfortable. You get the routine of flying north instead of cross-country, you get the familiarity with the region, and you get a fan base that treats these showcase games as mini holidays. That stuff does not move a money line by 10 cents, but it absolutely matters when you are talking about a favorite that needs to win by margin instead of just surviving. Even the way the number is set hints at how bookmakers view the gap between these teams. Gonzaga laying about 9.5 on a neutral court against a ranked opponent that sits 25th in the polls is aggressive. You do not get that type of spread unless one side has shown that when they win, they often win by a lot, and that the other side has enough offensive droughts that runaway stretches are in play. UCLA has already had scoring lulls bite them. That Arizona game flipped late when their offense stalled, and the Cal game turned when they could not answer a second half run. Against a Gonzaga group that lives on 11-0 bursts, those 3 or 4 wasted trips can very quickly become the exact kind of gap that either glides to a comfortable cover or forces fouls and desperation threes that turn a 6-point game into a 13-point final. So when you put it all together, you have an elite offense that punishes mistakes, a huge rebounding edge, real depth across 9 rotation pieces, and a neutral building that should feel more like a celebration than a road test. UCLA can absolutely throw punches, and they are too tough to vanish, but this specific setup leans toward one side being more likely to win the math problem by margin instead of just squeaking by. As our first pick for this matchup, the Gonzaga Bulldogs to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. One team wants a track meet, the other wants a chess match, and the number sitting in the mid-150s is essentially Vegas shrugging and saying, "You guys figure out whose personality actually shows up on Saturday night." On the surface, UCLA's profile screams caution to anyone thinking about a high total. They are giving up around 65 points per game. They sit near the top of the country in scoring defense, and their whole identity under this staff has been about dragging opponents into fewer possessions and uglier shots. They just held Oregon to 63 in a game where they had to stiffen up in the final 5 minutes, and even Arizona, which is no stranger to high-scoring games, needed a late run just to get to 69. On paper, that looks like an anchor pulling the total down. But here is the thing, Gonzaga is not really a paper team right now. They lead their league in scoring at just under 93 points per night. They are top tier nationally in offensive efficiency, and they score in every way that annoys a defense. They run off misses, they run off makes, and if you actually manage to get them into the half court, they still punish you through post touches, cutting, and spray threes. When a group like that hits your careful defensive structure over and over, something usually breaks, and once it breaks, the game tends to speed up whether you like it or not. Recent history with Gonzaga totals tells a pretty loud story. Alabama tried to trade punches. The final landed at 95-85. Maryland tried to guard them straight up. That ended 100-61. Even in the bounce back against Kentucky, a team with athletes everywhere, Gonzaga still put up 94, and North Florida found itself in a 109-58 track meet with a Zags roster that was missing its leading scorer. That is not a fluke run of box scores. That is a pattern of games where once Gonzaga's offense finds a rhythm, the score starts climbing in chunks. Now think about how UCLA's style interacts with that. They want to walk the ball up and use clock, yes, but their own offense has quietly been more efficient than people realize. They are scoring over 77 per game, they move the ball well, and guys like Tyler Bilodeau, Sky Clark, Donovan Dent, and Eric Daly Jr. can all put up real numbers when the game loosens even slightly. Against Arizona, they hung 65 while shooting over 50% from 3. Against Cal and San Francisco, they got to 72 in a game where their defense simply could not get enough stops late. That version of UCLA, where their own scoring shows up, actually pushes the total toward the higher side because Gonzaga almost never plays low possession, low-scoring grinders unless the other team absolutely wins the tempo war. The tempo tug of war is really the heart of the total. UCLA sits in the 300s nationally in pace, content to grind. Gonzaga wants closer to 70 possessions, maybe more, and they have the tools to force that. Their rebounding edge, that plus 12.7 margin on the glass, means more one-and-done trips for opponents and more chances to run after defensive boards. Their steal rate is also among the best in their conference, which turns into live ball turnovers and runouts, the most efficient kind of possession for pushing a game past a number. Once you get a 10-point swing off those sequences, the team that wanted to crawl often has to speed up just to stay attached. There is also the late-game script that people sometimes forget when they look at totals. If this stays within shouting distance late, say a 2 or 3 possession game either way, you are going to see intentional fouling, timeouts, and extended possessions where the scoreboard keeps ticking even if the actual basketball is not pretty. Both teams have multiple capable ball handlers, which makes splitting double teams and forcing late-game free throws more likely. If the game gets sideways in Gonzaga's direction, you get the other classic total scenario, extended garbage time where bench guys are out there hunting shots and trying to earn minutes on film. Gonzaga's bench is too talented to just dribble the clock out, and UCLA's depth pieces have every incentive to keep playing hard even if the margin is not friendly. So while one side of this matchup absolutely wants something that looks like 58-62 at halftime, the way these rosters actually function, with Gonzaga's relentless pace, elite offense, and live ball turnover profile, and UCLA's underrated scoring punch when their shooters are dialed in, sets this up far more as a game that flirts with the mid-150s and beyond than something that stalls out in the high 130s. There are always risks. Poor shooting nights or whistle-heavy first halves can distort a script, but with what both teams have shown so far, the overall scoring environment tilts in one clear direction. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.